I wasn't planning on living with anyone anytime soon, especially not my ex's best friend. But life has a funny way of laughing in your face. It all started 6 months after my breakup with Brandon. We'd been together 2 years, long enough for him to learn all my quirks, but not long enough to stop him from cheating with some guy he accidentally met at the gym. Classic. The breakup was messy, as they always are. And for the first few months, I tried to keep my distance from everything tied to him. That included mutual friends, shared hangouts, and especially his best friend, Lucas. Lucas was tall, quiet, had this messy dark hair that always looked intentionally disheveled, and these ridiculously intense eyes. I always assumed he hated me. He was Brandon's best friend, after all, and I figured loyalty ran deep. Turns out, I was wrong. 3 months ago, out of the blue, Lucas texted me. He was moving out of his apartment, his roommate was leaving the city, and he was looking for a place fast. "Hey man," the message read. "I know it's random, but any chance you're still looking for a roommate?" I stared at my phone for a full minute, wondering if I'd fallen into a parallel universe. We'd never really hung out one-on-one. Small talk at parties, occasional jokes at brunches, sure. But this? Still, my lease was bleeding me dry, and I hadn't had any luck finding someone decent to split it with, so I said yes. Lucas moved in 2 weeks later. The first few days were awkward. We danced around each other like two people who just met through a dating app and were pretending not to have seen each other half naked on Instagram. He was polite, kept to himself, and spent most of his time either working from the kitchen table or at the gym. But it wasn't long before the walls started to come down. One night, maybe a week in, I came home late from work. My boss had kept me after for some nonsense team-building event that mostly involved overpriced tacos and bad karaoke. I opened the front door, tired and starving, and there was Lucas, standing barefoot in the kitchen, shirtless, eating cereal straight from the box. He looked up, mouth full, and said, "Want some?" That was the first night we talked, like really talked. I poured myself a bowl, leaned against the counter, and we stayed there for over an hour, just swapping stories. Him telling me about growing up in New Mexico, his plan to get into interior design, I didn't know he was into that, and me explaining how I ended up in marketing, even though I majored in art history. It was easy, easier than it should have been. That became our thing, late night cereal talks. Sometimes with music playing softly in the background, sometimes in silence, except for the clink of spoons and the occasional laugh. He started showing me his sketches, layouts for rooms, color palettes, furniture combinations. I pretended to know what I was looking at, but I was mostly focused on how his eyes lit up when he talked about it, and that's when things started getting weird. Not bad weird. Confusing weird. Like the night I found his hoodie in my bed. It was a soft, oversized gray hoodie that I'd seen him wear a dozen times. I walked into my room after a shower, towel still around my waist, and there it was, folded neatly on my pillow. I knocked on his door, holding it out. "Hey, this yours?" He glanced up from his laptop and smirked. "Yeah, you're always cold. Figured you could use it." I wanted to say something clever, something sarcastic. But my brain short-circuited. Instead, I mumbled, "Thanks," and closed my door, heart-hammering for reasons I didn't want to admit. It didn't stop there. There were the lingering glances when we crossed paths in the hallway. The way he started sitting closer on the couch during movie nights. The fact that he'd casually rest his hand on my knee when he was laughing at something I said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. But the moment that really messed with my head, it was that Thursday night. We were halfway through rewatching The Office, sprawled out on opposite ends of the couch, legs tangled somewhere in the middle. Lucas had just taken a shower, his hair still damp, wearing sweatpants and that same hoodie he'd left in my room. He looked over, eyes half-lidded from the wine we'd split, and asked, "Do you ever miss him?" It took me a second to register what he meant. "Brandon?" I asked. He nodded, not breaking eye contact. I shrugged. Sometimes. Mostly I just miss not being alone. Lucas didn't say anything for a moment. Then he reached over and gently tugged at my blanket, covering my leg with it. "You're not alone," he said quietly. The air between us shifted. And I realized something in that moment. I wasn't the only one feeling the tension. Lucas had his secrets too. The next morning, I tried to act normal. Tried being the key word. I got up early, made coffee, even put on music like it was any other Thursday. But everything felt off. The way Lucas had looked at me last night, the way his voice had gone all soft, it kept playing on a loop in my head. You're not alone. I didn't know what he meant exactly. If it was a kind gesture or something more, and I didn't dare ask, Lucas didn't mention it either. He walked into the kitchen like he hadn't said anything remotely intense the night before, hair still messy from sleep, rubbing his eyes with the back of his hand like some kind of walking Instagram thirst trap. "Morning," he mumbled, heading straight for the coffee pot. "Hey," I replied, trying not to overanalyze the way his voice sounded gravelly in the morning. We sipped our coffee in silence for a few minutes before he nodded at the table. "You working from home today?" "Yeah, client wants a deck by 3, I said, scrolling through my inbox. "Should be fun," he groaned. "I've got a floor plan presentation to finish by noon, and my printer decided to die this morning." "Oh," I offered. "You can use mine if you want. It's in my room." Lucas looked up. "You sure?" "Yeah. It's already plugged in. Just don't judge the mess." His mouth twitched into a grin. "No promises." It was a small thing, but it felt intimate. Him going into my room, using my stuff. We weren't just coexisting anymore. We were overlapping. Later that afternoon, I stepped into my room and found him on my bed, lying on his stomach, laptop open in front of him. He was half watching a video, half sketching something in his notebook, one socked foot swinging lazily in the air. "You comfortable?" I asked, amused. He glanced up, unfazed. "Your bed's comfier than mine. Don't worry, I didn't snoop. You could have asked." "You said I could use the printer," he said with a smirk. "Didn't realize there were conditions." I rolled my eyes but didn't tell him to move. Instead, I sat down beside him, pretending not to notice how close our arms were. We both watched the video on his screen for a few seconds, some design walkthrough of a downtown loft. Lucas nudged me with his elbow. "You like it?" I shrugged. "It's cool. Bit too minimal for me, though. Needs warmth." "Exactly," he said, looking over at me. "That's what I said, too. Needs something more lived in." And then, this. He shifted slightly, his head resting on his folded arms, and his face ended up maybe a foot from mine. He didn't move. Neither did I. For a few long seconds, it was just the sound of the video and the barely there tension between us, like a stretched rubber band about to snap. "Do you ever think about it?" Lucas asked, his voice quieter now. "About starting over?" I frowned slightly. "You mean after a breakup?" "After everything," he said. "Like, what if none of it ever happened? What if you never met Brandon and we—" He cut himself off, and in that pause, my heart decided to sprint. "We what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Lucas looked away for the first time since I'd sat down. "Nothing. Forget it." But I didn't forget it. I couldn't. Because later that night, he said something else I couldn't ignore. We'd both been working late, sitting side by side on the couch with our laptops open. It was quiet. No music, no TV, just the occasional click of keys and sips of wine. Around 11, Lucas closed his laptop and leaned back with a sigh. "I need a break." I shut mine too. "Same. You ever think we're just wasting our 20s staring at screens?" he asked, stretching his arms behind his head. I laughed. "Absolutely. But hey, at least the lighting in here is flattering." He grinned, and then, just like that, his mood shifted. He turned his body toward me on the couch, one leg tucked under him, and looked me dead in the eyes. "You ever want to just do something reckless?" he asked. I blinked. "Define reckless." His smile was almost mischievous. "Like something you wouldn't normally do, something that might change everything." I swallowed. My throat felt tight. "Depends on what it is." He leaned in slightly. "What if it's something you've thought about before, but never acted on?" And just like that, the space between us felt dangerously small. My pulse was pounding, every nerve ending on high alert. "Have you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Lucas didn't answer. Instead, he did something else. He reached out and gently touched the edge of my hoodie. His hoodie, the one I was wearing. His fingers barely brushed my sleeve. "You kept this," he said quietly. I nodded. "It's comfortable." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "I gave it to you on purpose." My breath hitched. "I know," I said, and neither of us moved. I should have kissed him right then. That moment, with the couch still warm under us, the air charged, the tension balanced on a knife's edge, I should have leaned in. I should have crossed that last inch between us. But I didn't. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I didn't trust what I thought I was seeing. Or maybe, deep down, I wasn't ready for what might happen after. So I sat there, motionless, heart slamming in my chest, while Lucas's fingers lingered on the edge of my sleeve, like he was debating something too. Then, slowly, he pulled his hand back. "I'm gonna crash," he mumbled, eyes flicking away. "Yeah," I said, way too fast. "Yeah, me too." He stood up, rubbing the back of his neck, and walked toward his room without looking back. I sat there for a long time after he left, staring at the empty space he'd just been sitting in. What the hell was that? The next day was awkward. He left early for class, and I buried myself in client work just to avoid thinking about any of it. We didn't text. We didn't cross paths. It was like neither of us wanted to acknowledge what had almost happened. But that night, something shifted again. I had just come out of the shower, towel slung around my shoulders, when I walked past his room and heard music playing, low and slow, something moody and soft, like lo-fi jazz. It wasn't his usual playlist. The door was open a few inches. I don't know what possessed me to knock, but I did. "Yeah?" Lucas called. I pushed the door open. He was sitting on his bed, shirtless, wearing only pajama pants, sketchbook resting against his thighs. The lamplight made everything in the room feel softer, warmer, like the walls themselves had decided to let their guard down. He looked up, startled for half a second. Then his face relaxed. "Hey." "Hey," I said, hovering by the doorway. I just wanted to see if you were cool." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah." "You?" I shrugged. "Been a weird couple days." Lucas let out a quiet laugh. "You can say that again." I hesitated. "Can I come in?" His eyes held mine for a beat before he shifted to make space beside him. "Yeah." I sat on the edge of his bed, the sketchbook now angled away from me, but I could still make out parts of what he'd been drawing. Interiors, sure, but also a figure. A male form. Shoulders, torso, something intimate and incomplete. "Is that me?" I asked, before I could stop myself. Lucas blinked, then closed the sketchbook with a soft snap. "Maybe," he said. "You sit still a lot." I laughed, mostly to break the tension. "That's not creepy at all." "It's not meant to be," he said, and his voice was softer than before. "Sometimes I draw stuff I don't have the nerve to say out loud." That shut me up. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Lucas leaned forward slightly, his elbows on his knees, head hanging low. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yeah." "Do you ever wish things had gone differently?" I frowned. "With what?" "Back then, when you were with Brandon. If maybe we'd met under different circumstances." I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, "Yeah, I do." Lucas looked up. "I always thought you hated me," I added. "I didn't," he said. "I just didn't know how to act." "You were with him, and I—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "You what?" I asked, my voice low. He swallowed. "I wanted to be around you more than I should have." That hit me like a punch to the chest. I turned toward him fully now, the space between us almost non-existent. The silence felt heavy again, like the room itself was holding its breath. "You're not just saying that, are you?" I asked. "Because this is starting to feel like a very cruel dream." Lucas shook his head, eyes locked on mine. "I'm not saying it to mess with you." I nodded slowly, my heart in my throat. He reached up, fingers brushing my jaw, barely there. "You've got this look," he whispered. "What look?" "Like you're waiting for someone to make the first move." My breath hitched. "Maybe I am," I said. And this time, I didn't hesitate. I closed the distance, leaned in, and kissed him. It wasn't rushed or hungry or dramatic. It was slow. Sure, like we'd both been waiting for it. Lucas responded instantly, his hand curling around the back of my neck, pulling me closer. His lips were warm, his breath shaky, and the second our mouths moved in sync, something unspoken settled between us. Not regret, not guilt, relief. When we finally pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine. "Finally," he whispered. "Yeah," I breathed, smiling. "Took us long enough." We didn't sleep together that night. I feel like people always expect that. Like the first kiss should instantly spiral into clothes on the floor and tangled sheets. But that wasn't what happened. After we kissed, we just sat there for a while, forehead to forehead, like we both needed to let the moment settle. I don't think either of us wanted to break it. The quiet in the room was heavier than before, but not uncomfortable. He eventually pulled back and said, "Do you want to stay?" Not in a sexy way, just a quiet invitation. So I nodded, and we climbed under the covers, fully clothed. No funny business, just lying side by side in the dark, close enough that our arms brushed. He turned toward me, propped up on one elbow. "I meant what I said earlier, about wishing we'd met differently." "I know," I said, watching the shadows play across his face. "Brandon didn't deserve you," he added, voice low. "I always thought that." I rolled onto my side, mirroring him. "So why didn't you say anything?" He gave a small, sad laugh. "Because I thought I was being loyal. To him. And maybe a little scared, too." "You? Scared?" I teased, but my voice caught in my throat. "I was terrified," he said. "Because every time you laughed at something stupid I said, or every time you walked into a room wearing those ugly-ass socks." "Hey," I said, shoving him lightly. He smiled. I felt something. And I knew I wasn't supposed to. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Then Lucas reached over, fingers brushing mine under the blanket, and laced them together. "I don't want to mess this up," he whispered. "You won't," I said, and I meant it. That night, I fell asleep with his hand in mine. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. But nothing felt forced. We didn't label it right away. We just leaned into it. There were more late nights talking on the couch, brushing shoulders in the hallway, sharing dumb inside jokes at the grocery store. But now, there was also forehead kisses and sleepy cuddles on the weekends, and the kind of soft touches that didn't need to be explained. Lucas had a way of being present that I hadn't realized I missed so much. Like when I was rambling about a frustrating client, and he'd be watching me with this quiet, amused look. Like whatever I was saying was the most interesting thing he'd ever heard. Or when he'd wake up first and leave a cup of coffee by my side of the bed, just the way I liked it. Small things. Thoughtful things. He never rushed it. Never pushed for more than I was ready for. But he was always there. And that consistency, God, that meant everything. One Sunday morning, we were both sprawled on the floor putting together a bookshelf from IKEA, and he looked over at me, holding a tiny metal dowel, and said, "You know, this is basically a relationship test, right?" I snorted. "I thought that was building a tent together." "Nah," he said. "Tents are for camping bros. This is intimacy warfare." "Intimacy warfare? You ever see a couple try to figure out which way a screw goes while still liking each other at the end? That's battle-level trust." I laughed, tossing a bracket at him. "Well, we're either going to end up making out or breaking up." Lucas caught the bracket and smiled. "Hopefully the first one." He leaned over and kissed me right there, on the living room rug, surrounded by half-assembled furniture and IKEA manuals. It wasn't a movie moment. It was better. The only problem? We hadn't told anyone. Not his friends, not mine, and definitely not Brandon. The first two didn't bother me too much. We were still figuring things out after all. But Brandon, his shadow hung over us like a question neither of us wanted to answer. One night, over takeout, Lucas brought it up. "So I ran into Brandon at the gym," he said, not meeting my eyes. My chopsticks froze halfway to my mouth. "Oh? Yeah," he continued, casually poking at his noodles. "He asked if we still talk." I waited. "And?" "I told him we lived together." I raised an eyebrow. "That's it?" Lucas looked up, his expression unreadable. He said something like, "Weird. Didn't think you two were even friends." I set my food down. "What did you say?" Lucas paused, then shrugged. "Nothing. I just walked away." The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was heavy. Complicated. "You think we should tell him?" I asked eventually. Lucas leaned back, sighing. "I don't know. It's not like we owe him anything. But I also don't want to pretend like we're hiding." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that." "Are you ashamed?" he asked softly. That hit me hard. "No," I said immediately. "God, no, I hesitated. "It's not that simple." Lucas nodded. "Nothing ever is." He didn't push after that. And I loved him a little more for it. Brandon found out before we told him. Of course he did. It was a stupid, avoidable mistake. I posted a photo on my Instagram story without thinking. Just a blurry pic of Lucas asleep on the couch, wrapped in that old gray hoodie, my caption reading, "Sunday mornings, softest edition." I didn't tag him. I didn't even use our names. But apparently, that was enough. Because the next afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from Brandon for the first time in months. "Brandon, so that's what we're doing now?" No context, no greeting. Just that. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Lucas was at class, and I didn't know if I should respond, ignore it, or hurl my phone into the sun. Instead, I waited until he got home. He walked in like it was any other day, dropping his bag by the door, kicking his shoes off, and stretching with a yawn that made his t-shirt right up in a way that was totally unfair. Then he saw my face. "What happened?" he asked, dropping the act immediately. I handed him my phone without saying a word. He read the message, his jaw tightening just slightly. Then he handed it back. "I'll talk to him." "No," I said. "It's my mess too. I'll handle it." Lucas gave me a look, one I couldn't quite read. But he didn't argue. "Just don't let him get in your head," he said quietly. "He's good at that." That night, I met Brandon at a coffee shop near his apartment. Neutral ground. I spotted him immediately. Same smug confidence. Same perfectly styled hair. Same leather jacket he wore when he wanted to feel intimidating. He didn't smile when I sat down. "So," he said, arms crossed, "you and Lucas?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah," he scoffed. "Guess I shouldn't be surprised. You always had a thing for people close to me." I leaned back. "No, I had a thing for people who didn't lie to me." He rolled his eyes. "So what, you two are, like, dating now? Sleeping together in the bed I used to?" "Don't." I cut in, my voice calm but cold. Brandon narrowed his eyes. "Does he know? What you're like when you get bored?" I blinked, stunned. "What the hell are you talking about?" He leaned forward. "You always needed someone to validate you. That's what this is, right? Some revenge fantasy?" I didn't even realize I was gripping the edge of the table until my fingers started to ache. "This isn't about you," I said, voice low. "It never was." Brandon snorted. "Right. Just a coincidence you end up in bed with my best friend." I stood up. "Lucas stopped being your best friend the moment you cheated on me and made him lie about it. That shut him up. For a second, at least." Then I added, "He's not choosing sides, Brandon. You made the choice for both of us." I walked out without waiting for a response. When I got home, Lucas was waiting on the couch, scrolling his phone, but clearly not reading anything. I didn't say anything. I just walked over and sat next to him, then leaned my head on his shoulder. He didn't ask how it went. He just pulled me closer. I don't need to know the details, he said quietly. Just tell me if I need to beat someone's ass. I laughed, which was exactly what I needed to do. No ass beating required. He knows. Good. We stayed like that for a while, curled up in the quiet, and I realized, more than ever, that this was what safety felt like. A few days later, we made it official. There was no dramatic conversation, no romantic confession. We were brushing our teeth in the bathroom one morning, him shirtless, me half asleep, and I caught him watching me in the mirror. What? I asked, foamy mouth and all. He spit, rinsed, and grinned. We're boyfriends now, right? I paused. I thought so. Cool, he said. Just checking. Then he kissed me with minty breath and sleepy eyes, and I nearly dropped my toothbrush. We started telling people, little by little. Most of our friends were weirdly supportive. A few were surprised, but no one seemed bothered. One of my coworkers actually said, "Took y'all long enough," which made us laugh way harder than it should have. Eventually, Lucas started leaving little drawings of me around the apartment, on post-it notes, receipts, napkins. Sometimes just my face, sometimes me doing something dumb, like dancing in the kitchen or drooling on the couch. I started keeping them in a box under my bed. I didn't tell him that part. Some things you keep for yourself, even when you share everything else. We didn't have some dramatic honeymoon phase. That's not how real relationships work. Some mornings, Lucas left his cereal bowl in the sink even though we had a dishwasher. I'd get cranky if he opened the curtains too early on weekends. He liked the window open at night. I needed it closed. But those were just surface-level things. What mattered? The stuff that really defined us ran deeper, like how he always knew when to touch me. Not in the physical way, though, yeah, that too. The subtle stuff. When I got a rejection email from a freelance client I'd been chasing for months, I found a post-it on my laptop that just said, "They're idiots. You're brilliant." No name, no frills, just his handwriting, slightly messy, always in lowercase. Or, when I had a headache and curled up in bed early, he brought me a glass of water and sat on the edge of the mattress, rubbing my back with slow, wordless strokes. We were never performative. There were no daily declarations of love or choreographed TikTok-style affection. Just this steady, growing sense of, you're mine and I'm yours, even when it wasn't said aloud. Then his mom came to visit. We hadn't discussed the parent topic yet. Lucas had mentioned his mom a few times. Divorced, lived upstate, super chill. But I didn't realize visit meant stay in our apartment for 3 days. She showed up on a Friday afternoon with a suitcase, a pie, and a suspiciously assessing look in her eyes. "Mom, this is my roommate," Lucas said, but his voice had this tight undertone. I raised an eyebrow. "Roommate? Seriously?" She smiled politely, shook my hand, and said, "So you're the one he's been drawing lately?" Lucas nearly choked on air. "Mom," she just shrugged. "What?" "You leave your sketchbook open on the coffee table." I'm not blind. I tried not to laugh. For the next 2 days, I played the role of roommate, even though she clearly knew better. She wasn't judgmental. If anything, she seemed amused. But Lucas was weirdly on edge. After dinner on her second night, when she was in the shower, I finally confronted him in the kitchen. "Roommate?" I asked, leaning against the counter. He winced. I panicked. "You didn't panic. You had time to introduce me." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I just didn't know how she'd take it." I softened a little. "Hey, it's okay. You don't owe anyone a label." He looked at me then, really looked at me. "I want her to know," he said. "I just didn't want to make it weird." "You mean, make it real?" I said gently. Lucas nodded. Yeah, that night, when his mom came out in her pajamas and sat on the couch with us, Lucas reached over and took my hand. No announcement. No declaration. Just fingers lacing quietly between mine while a cooking show played in the background. She glanced over, nodded once, and said, "Took you long enough." Lucas laughed, really laughed, and I could see the weight lift from his shoulders. A month later, we went to a friend's party. It was one of those rooftop things, music, drinks, people in linen shirts pretending to be cool under fairy lights. We stuck together most of the night, but at one point, I lost him in the crowd. I was halfway through a drink when I turned around and saw him talking to someone I didn't recognize, a guy with a sharp haircut and too much cologne. They were laughing. Close. Too close? I felt something twist in my chest. The old feeling. Insecurity, fear, that stupid voice that says, "You're not enough. You never were." Before I could spiral, Lucas looked up and saw me. His expression shifted instantly. He said something quick to the guy, then walked over. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. I shrugged, trying to play it off. "Yeah, you look like you were having fun." He tilted his head. "That's Mason. He works with my professor. He was asking if I'd be interested in a mentorship program." "Oh," Lucas stepped closer, his hand brushing mine. "You thought I was flirting." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." I hated how seen I felt. Lucas reached up, gently tucked a piece of hair behind my ear, something he'd never done before. It was soft, intimate, and kinda hot, if I'm being honest. "You don't have to worry," he said. "If I wanted anyone else, I wouldn't be here with you." The tightness in my chest uncoiled a little. "Sorry," I said. "Sometimes I forget this is real." Lucas leaned in, kissed the corner of my mouth. "It's real," he said. "It's the most real thing I've had in a long time." We didn't talk about love for a while. Not directly. It wasn't that we were afraid of it. It just didn't feel urgent. Everything we did already felt like love. Quiet mornings, cooking breakfast side by side, falling asleep to the sound of each other's breath. The way his hand would instinctively reach for mine when we crossed the street. But eventually, it slipped out. We were grocery shopping. Yep, that's when it happened. Right next to the canned beans and taco shells. Lucas was checking expiration dates on a bag of shredded cheese like it was a bomb, and I, very casually, said, "You're so annoying. I love you." The second I said it, my stomach dropped. He froze. I froze. I hadn't planned it. It just came out. A reflex, like sneezing or breathing. One second I was annoyed about cheddar, and the next, I had said it. Out loud. In public. I turned to face him, suddenly hyper-aware of the fluorescent lighting and the echoey hum of an overhead speaker playing 80s soft rock. Lucas blinked. "What did you just say?" I cleared my throat. "I said I love you. Because you're annoying. And because I do." He stared at me for a beat too long. Then he grinned. "About damn time," he said, reaching out and pulling me into a hug right there in the aisle. I laughed into his chest. "You knew?" "Of course I knew," he murmured. "I've been waiting for you to say it since the second you started stealing all the hot water." He didn't say it back right away. And weirdly, that made me love him even more. Because when he did say it, 2 nights later, lying in bed with his arms slung over my chest, the glow of the TV flickering against his face, it was quiet. Intentional. "I love you too," he whispered. No fanfare, no dramatic music, just those 4 words. And they hit harder than any grand gesture ever could. Things weren't perfect. They never are. We still had disagreements, little ones, about groceries, chores, whose turn it was to vacuum. Sometimes we misread each other's silences or forgot to check in after a long day. But now we had a rhythm, a way of coming back to each other. Lucas had this habit of sending me photos of weird chairs from his Pinterest feed when he was mad at me. It was his peace offering. I'd wake up to a message like, "This chair is shaped like a butt. Can we be friends again?" We had inside jokes, nicknames, and a shared calendar that we never remembered to update. But we were figuring it out, 2 imperfect people building something quietly strong. One Sunday afternoon, I walked into the living room and found him asleep on the couch, curled up in that same gray hoodie, a sketch pad on his chest. I sat down at the edge of the couch, careful not to wake him, and just watched for a while, and it hit me. This was it. Not the dramatic stuff. Not the first kiss or the late-night confessions, but this. The comfort. The safety. The feeling of being fully seen and still fully wanted. I reached over, lifted the sketchpad carefully, and flipped through it. There were pages of concepts and blueprints, but tucked between them, like he hadn't meant for me to see, were drawings of me. Dozens. All different. Some rough, others carefully shaded. Me sleeping. Me laughing. Me brushing my teeth. Me, as seen by someone who really looked. I didn't wake him. I just sat there, heart full, knowing that whatever this was, it was ours. A few months later, we moved. The old apartment was fine, comfortable, familiar, but it wasn't really ours. It still had the echoes of before, of roommates, of Brandon, of who we were before we found each other. So we started looking. It didn't take long. Lucas had a knack for spotting potential, even in places that looked like crime scenes and listing photos. The one we ended up picking was on a quiet street with a crooked mailbox, creaky floors, and the weirdest kitchen backsplash I've ever seen. But it had light. So much light. Big windows, soft mornings, space to grow. We signed the lease on a rainy Wednesday. The day we moved in, we were both soaked to the bone, exhausted, and surrounded by way too many cardboard boxes that somehow all contained mugs. Seriously, why did we own 20 mugs? Lucas dropped a box labeled Miss Crap in the living room and said, "This place smells like fresh paint and potential." I leaned against the wall, smiling. "That your professional design opinion?" He shrugged. "It's not bad for a guy who used to draw dicks in his freshman year architecture class." I laughed, walking over to him, wrapping my arms around his damp hoodie. We kissed there, in the middle of the chaos. It wasn't rushed or passionate or movie perfect. It was just home. We built our new life one ordinary day at a time. Lucas got a full-time gig with a boutique design firm. I landed a long-term client that paid on time. A miracle. We painted the living room together, argued over curtain lengths, and eventually adopted a rescue dog named Bean, who peed on the couch within the first hour. We hosted our first dinner party, burned half the food, still laughed through it. There were quiet nights with wine and loud mornings with hangovers. Sundays spent in bed with takeout. Wednesday nights folding laundry and arguing about whether a fitted sheet counts as a win in adulting. But through it all, he was there. Lucas became my constant, the one who left notes in my lunch bag when I had a tough day, the one who learned my coffee order without asking, the one who stood beside me at my sister's wedding, hand on the small of my back, grounding me when my mom gave that look. And I was his, in every sense of the word. One night, a year after we moved in, we were lying on the couch, half watching some documentary about space. Bean was snoring at our feet. Lucas's head was in my lap, and I was absent-mindedly playing with his hair. He looked up at me suddenly. "What?" I asked, smiling. Lucas paused. Then, without any build-up, he said, "Marry me." I blinked. "No ring? No crowd? No speech?" He shrugged. "Do you want a ring?" "I mean, yes, obviously." "Cool, I'll get one." But I wanted to ask first. I laughed, this weird, shaky laugh that cracked open my chest, and said, "Yes, you idiot. Of course." He smiled, that soft, smug Lucas smile, and closed his eyes again, like the matter was settled. And honestly, it was.